Bugün Benjamin Covin ile tanıştırmak istiyorum. Eğer bugüne kadar bu imkanı bulamadıysanız umarım sizin için faydalı bir tanışma olacağını düşünüyorum. Kendisinin hem YouTube kanalını hem de web sitesinin linkini aşağıya bırakıyorum. Herhangi bir reklam amaçlı değil, sadece bilgilendirme amaçlı çok fazla veri toplayan, kendisinin değişik alanlarda hem educational, yani eğitim anlamındaki tecrübeleri, aldığı eğitim, kendisinin doktorası var, mühendis. E, Matematikle ilgileniyor ve çok fazla veri topluyor. Bu verileri değişik chartlarla, değişik tablolarla sunuyor. Değerli buluyorum. O yüzden hiçbir yerde bu kadar çok fazla veriyle karşılaşmadım. Tabii ki zincir analizi yapan, veren siteler çok fazla var ama umarım keyifle izlersiniz. Bir sonraki videoda görüşmek üzere. Hoşçakalın.
True that most Septembers are red, that doesn't necessarily mean that every September has to be red. And at some point, we'll make one of these videos and we will in fact find us in a green September, right? So we always have to admit, hey, it is a general trend and it's likely to be a red month, but there's no guarantees with that, and it's possible it ends up being green. With that said, if you're curious, the last time we had a green September, you would have to go back to 2016. So 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and potentially 2023, we don't know yet, but 6 red Septembers in a row. In fact, if you were to average out all the prior months, going back through the history we have here for Bitcoin, there's only 2 red months, August and September. However, September's average return is negative 6.6% or so. But that's currently taking into account this, but it's around negative 7%. August, the average return is around negative 1.3%. Now, the standard deviations on this obviously are quite large, so I'm not asking you to take it to the bank because I guarantee they're not going to cash it in. But I will say, on average, Bitcoin tends to drop 7% in September, okay, on average. Now, where would a 7% drop put Bitcoin? Well, at the current price of 26K, 7% down, in fact, puts you at 24K, right? 24K, which isn't really that far down. I mean, we were at that price more or less just a couple of months ago. Just a few months ago, we went below $25,000. But a 7% drop would put Bitcoin at approximately $24,000. Now, it might also be worthwhile to point out that in the last pre-halving year of 2019, Bitcoin dropped 14%. So instead of dropping 7%, it dropped 14%. A 14% drop would actually put Bitcoin down at 22K, right? $22,000. Now, I put out a tweet recently, a couple of days ago, saying that I think there's a decent chance that Bitcoin will see 23K in September. Now, is it a guarantee? Of course not, right? It's not a guarantee by any stretch of the imagination. It's just to say, you know what? Historically, we've seen red Septembers. Historically. We have a little bit of momentum here to the downside already. We just had 2 red months in a row. And note that this red month that we just got closed below these areas, right? Where you can see that we had some support, potentially or theoretically at around 27K. We broke below that on at least the monthly close. And I said, well, from a structural point of view, it would seem likely that at some point we're going to come back down and at the very least check out what's going on at 23K. You can see that in January we went up to 23K. February we opened and closed at 23K. And then in March we opened at 23K. So it seems from a structural point of view that 23K is a likely outcome. Okay, now I said in the tweet I think it's going to happen in September. It's possible that it doesn't. Like maybe it happens in October. I don't know. But the point is that given the seasonality, given the idea of, say, negative 7% to negative 14%, it kind of seems like, 23K could in fact happen. Now, the average return in all pre-halving years for September is actually a bit different. It's actually negative 17%. So a 17% draw. This is just if you average out all three prior pre-halving years. A 17% drop would put Bitcoin down at 21K, 21.5K. Now, with that said, it's probably worthwhile to point out that in August, Bitcoin dropped 10%. Okay, and we said it'll probably drop, right? If you averaged out all the three prior Augusts in pre-halving years, not including the one in 2023, it would have given you about a negative 21% average. But if you had only averaged out the one in 2019 and 2015, it would have given you about a negative 11 or negative 12% average. So it ended up being closer to the average of the last two pre-halving years than actually taking that third one. And the reason we went through that exercise on Twitter, at least, by the way, make sure you follow me on Twitter if you don't. Was because in August of 2011, you can see it was about a negative 39% drop, negative 40% drop. So we said, well, why don't we remove that one and just look at the last two pre-halving years and see what it gives you, and it gives you more, closer to a negative, close to what we ended up getting. Okay. So if you just average out the last two pre-halving year Septembers, you actually see an average return of about negative 6%. Okay, so negative 6%. Would not be nearly as bad, right? I mean, that would all be all the way up here at around $24,000. So I still think that given the seasonality of Bitcoin around this time of the year, and you can already see that, it hasn't really gotten off to the best start, but given the seasonality of Bitcoin and given the momentum, right, and the fact that we just had a monthly close below, it would at least stand to reason that there's a good chance that Bitcoin's going to go test 23K. Probably, I think, a good chance it'll happen in September. Maybe not, right? Maybe it'll be October, for all I know. I don't know. But that is what I want us to sort of focus on this month, because our expectations have been met so far. And what were those expectations? Well, if you remember, we've said plenty of times, right? I mean, this is plenty of times we have said this, is that we go up for half the year, and we go down for half the year. And in 2019, 5 of the first 6 months were green, and then 5 of the last 6 months were red. And in 2011, 5 of the first 6 months were green, and then 5 of the last 6 months were red. In 2015, September was actually green, but in that case, we had already had 5 red months in that year before going into that September, and it was only about a 3% gain, right? But we'd already had 5 red months that year before September. This time, we've only had 3 red months before September. In 2019, we had only had 3 red months going into September. And in 2011, we had only had 3 red months going into September. So I would again argue that, from a sort of like this market cycle behavior perspective, you could argue that it's more closely following 2011 and 2019 in terms of monthly returns, green and red, than it is 2015. Also note that 2015, most of the first half of the year was red, and then the second half of the year was green. But in 2011 and 2019, it was the reverse. The first half of the year was mostly green, the second half of the year was mostly red. But in any case, what our general expectation of pre-halving years are that we go up for half the year, we go down for half the year, and by the end of the year, both bulls and bears are sufficiently wrecked.